So we've got our reading test here. So we're looking at section 1. So as always, you guys should know that the Ielts reading test is 3 sections. Each section you should spend about 20 minutes. The real challenge of Ielts reading is that the time is so short and limited. So you really have to make the most of your time when you start taking your test. Okay? So you can see here we've got our answer sheet to the side, or we can put in our answers for checking. We've got our reading passage here, and then if we go down, we've got our different types of questions, okay? So typical for a section 1, we've got a matching the headings question, and we've got true, false, not given, everyone's favorite type of Ielts reading question. And then we've got a sort of writing fill in the table one, okay? So the first thing I always tell my students to do is to do a quick skim read of the reading, okay? So some people like to read the questions first. Some people like to do the reading first. It really depends on what works best for you. I prefer to just go through and read the first sentence of each paragraph before I start doing the questions, just so I get a feeling for the topic of the reading passage and where the different types of information are. Okay, so for example, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at section A, talking about Yellowstone caldera. I've never seen the word caldera before. I wouldn't know what a caldera was if I saw it. I know that Yellowstone is a national park in America. I visited it once on holiday. So I'm like, I don't know what a caldera is. Let's find out. So the first one, a caldera is, okay, so I can see here that we're giving a definition about what a caldera is. A caldera is a round collapse of basin or depression formed by magma being ejected from an underground reservoir, okay? So I can tell from straight away, just from reading the first sentence, okay, this paragraph is giving me basic information about a caldera and how they are made, okay, how calderas are made. The second one, B, is that the Yellowstone caldera is, so then we're becoming more specifically about Yellowstone, an old eruption site of a large resurgent volcano, which has created a beautiful valley in the Wyoming area of the United States, okay, covered with breathtaking geysers, the result of the volcanic eruption and the heat underneath it, okay? So again, we're talking specifically about Yellowstone. We've got a lot of adjectives here, beautiful valley, breathtaking geysers. So I'm like, okay, we're talking specifically about Yellowstone and we're giving a description of it, okay? So already I'm sort of planning out the sort of what's the main topics of each paragraph, all right? Now you can take a note in Korean if you want to, or in English as you're reading along, but I find it very useful to sort of do that as I'm going, okay? So this one, I would sort of say something like basic information. This one is about Yellowstone plus description. Okay, and then if we look at C, the Yellowstone area developed through 3 different eruptions. Okay, so we're looking at development. 3 different eruptions over a span of 2 million years. Okay, so we're kind of talking, we can see we're sort of, this paragraph's going to be probably going to be talking about history, or development of Yellowstone. Okay, and look at paragraph D. The United States Geological Survey reports that there is a 93% probability that the caldera will erupt again within the next 1,500 years. Okay, so we're looking at this, its future, we're looking at predictions. And we've mentioned the sort of United States and then this survey report. Okay. So just from literally reading the first sentence of each paragraph, I've already kind of got like a note going down the side that's telling me the kind of theme of the paragraph. So this is helpful, especially for students who struggle to remember information. Like a lot of students, you read the paragraph, you understand it as you're reading it, but then when you have to come back from the question, you've forgotten exactly where the information is. So that's why I find taking notes like this as you go down the paragraph so useful. And for some of my students who struggle with sort of remembering where information is, it helps you save time because you're not doing so much skimming and scanning as you go through, okay? So let me just get rid of that as we go down to E. And so E, it is suggested that no one in this lifetime will live to see a Yellowstone eruption. It would be a spectacular event and could quite possibly be one of the largest eruptions in Earth history. We'll live to see a Yellowstone eruption. Okay, so it's sort of like, again, talking about the future, maybe frequencies of the Yellowstone eruptions, okay? So by doing that, it's helpful to sort of get an idea of the basic structure of your paragraphs. and what the topics in each one are going to be. Because, as we all know, one of Ielts' favorite questions is we've got to come up with a heading or a title for each paragraph. So once we've read the first sentence, usually in a good paragraph, the first sentence of each paragraph should tell you the topic of it. Okay. So if we're looking at question 1, section A, we've got a choice. The features of a caldera, frequency of eruptions, probability, caldera in Yellowstone, potential causes of an eruption, different types of eruption, what to do in the event of eruption, periodic eruptions, natural beauty, what happens in an eruption. So we already know from looking at our first sentence that it starts with a caldera is. So we know that it's giving us information about a caldera. So we're like, chances are it's going to be one of these titles with caldera. It's either going to be the features of a caldera, or it's going to be the caldera in Yellowstone, okay? And I already know that from looking at that it's probably going to be, this one's going to be section A, right? And this one's going to be section B, okay? Because if we remember, we go back up, we've got the caldera is, and we've got the Yellowstone caldera, okay? So just from looking at that, I know that my section A is going to be the features of a caldera, and my section B is going to be the caldera in Yellowstone. Okay. So that's one of the things, again, like one of the reasons that I like doing a quick scan before I look at the questions. All right. Then we get down to C. What are my options for C? We know from the first sentence it said the Yellowstone area developed through 3 different eruptions over a span of 2 million years. And so we're talking about 3 different eruptions over 2 million years. So is it the frequency of eruptions? It could be the potential consequences, different types of eruptions, periodic eruptions over time. That should be used. Okay, so we've got different we've got periodic eruptions over time, or we've got the option of the frequency of eruptions. So it's like, so then we're like, we've got the choice between 2, so we've looked at the first sentence, so then we want to look at the second sentence. Some of the world's largest eruptions. There was an eruption forming the Huckleberry Ridge 2.1 million years ago. The second, the most recent eruption. Okay, so we can kind of see from this that they're talking about it's 3 different eruptions, and then they give there was an eruption, and then we've got the most second, the most recent. Okay, so they're talking about 3 specific eruptions over time. So I think the answer is probably going to be periodic eruptions over time. Okay, why? Because of the frequency of eruptions. If it was the frequency of eruptions, it would be saying something like it erupts every 10 million years, or it hasn't erupted for a long time, or something. It would be about change over time. Well, this one's giving us 3 different specific examples. So it's talking about periodic eruptions over time. So in the time period, 3 different specific eruptions. Okay, so you can see for that one that we had an idea from the first sentence. We narrowed it down to 2 choices, and then we had to read a little bit deeper into the paragraph to choose between the 2 of them. Even if you're pressed for time in the Ielts, usually just by reading the first sentence, you're able to narrow it down to 1 of 2 choices for that heading. And I know in an exam when you've got time pressure, that cuts your chances down to a 50-50 guess sometimes, right? So that can sometimes be helpful or a little bit useful. So if you look at section D, it's about the United States Geological Survey reports. So we saw this one as probability, 93% probability. So straight away I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be probability of another eruption, right? Straight away. There is a 93% probability, the probability of another eruption. Okay, so just from looking at the first sentence, I'm like, okay, that was quite straightforward. And then that leaves us with our last one about what we think is going to be the option for section E. It suggests that no one in this lifetime will live to see another Yellowstone eruption, but it would be a spectacular event and could quite possibly be one of the largest eruptions in Earth's history. Okay, so it's sort of talking about the future. It's looking at a future eruption. So we've got the potential consequences of an eruption, what to do in the event of eruption, what happens in an eruption. Okay, so we've got 3 options that are kind of giving sort of future-y, prediction-y like ideas. So let's take a look and see what it talks about. The next eruption could be larger than those found in the geological record. The ash flow would be so large, suffocate many people. So we're talking about sort of consequences and results here. The population in the surrounding area would be severely effective. The lava flow would destroy everything its way. So it's talking about lots of predictions, lots of consequences from the eruption. Okay, so I'm like, oh, it keeps talking about if this happened, this would happen. If something happened, this would happen. So straight away I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be potential consequences of an eruption. So if an eruption happened, what would be the consequences of that? All right. So we can see just from having done that first section of questions how it can be really helpful just read the first sentence of each paragraph and then go through. And it was only actually in 2 of the paragraphs that we had to read deeper into the information to sort of choose between 2 or 3 options, okay? But even if you're pressed for time, you're running out of time in the exam, just from the first sentence being able to narrow your choice down to a sort of 50-50 choice can sometimes be helpful for some students. Then we move on to the next type of question. Everyone loves true, false, or not given, okay? So it's a true statement if everything in the sentence agrees with the question sentence, okay? It's false if there is something in the paragraph or there's something in the sentence which is a direct contradiction. That's how you know it's false. It says something that is opposite or demonstrably false to what the sentence in the passage has said. It's not given if there's a possibility it could be true, if it's not a direct contradiction. So IELTS examiners like to try and trip people up with these true, false, and not givens, and sometimes they can be tricky. I've experienced like how tricky these questions can be trying to choose between false and not given as well. All right. So part of this is also helpful to be able to locate the place where the information is in the paragraph. So you can still do that from your initial scan and your initial note taking. That can help you locate the information that should be in your true, false, and not given as well. Okay. So question 6 says, a crater forms instead of a caldera when a smaller volcanic eruption takes place. Okay. So we're talking about a caldera and craters. Okay. So we're looking for information about a caldera. So I'm guessing this is probably going to be in our paragraph 1. Because this is the paragraph, remember, that's telling us what a caldera is. So it says, let's see, we're looking for crater and caldera. So there's no crater in the first instance. A caldera is similar to but different from a crater, which is caused by the displacement of rocks during an eruption. Okay, so I found our keywords here. So let's compare. A crater forms instead of a caldera when a smaller volcanic eruption takes place. A caldera is similar to but different from a crater, which is caused by the displacement of rocks during an eruption. Okay, so our key difference here is that the sentence in question 6 specifically says a smaller volcanic eruption. Okay, but our sentence in the passage just says during an eruption. All right, so is that going to be false or is that going to be not given? So because we don't know what type of eruption it says during the passage, during an eruption, it could be a smaller volcanic eruption, it could not be. So that's how we know it has to be not given, okay? Because the passage hasn't told us the type of eruption that it's going to be, okay? So this could be any eruption here, so that's how we know it's not given. All right, moving on to question 7. So question 7 says, a bulge or dome will always form in the same place over a magma chamber, okay? So our keywords that we're scanning for: bulge, dome, magma chamber. Okay, so let's take a look. Resurgent bulges. Okay, so we're still looking at information about a caldera, so it's still going to be in paragraph 1. We've got resurgent bulges forming calderas as a result of magma being forced into the magma chamber below the surface. Okay, so here we've got our keywords. So let's look at question 7 again. A bulge or dome will always form in the same place. Okay. So this is something IELTS examiners, like, they always want to be testing you. Often they will put words in there like, will often do something, will always do something, will never do something, okay? And then you've got to compare that to the information given in the passage to see if that's true or not, okay? So our sentence says, resurgent bulges forming calderas as a result of magma being forced into the magma chamber below the surface. So it says resurgent bulges form in calderas, but does it say anything about their frequency? It says they form. Do they form sometimes? 100% of the time? Okay, because this is asking you whether it's 100% of the time. whether they form. Okay, so it doesn't tell us the frequency in the passage, does it? There's no mention in the sentence in section A about how frequently these bulges form. Okay, so we have to choose not given, okay, because they've not said. If the sentence said resurgent bulges sometimes form in calderas, then question 7 would be false. Okay, if it said resurgent bulges form in calderas in every occasion, always, then it would be true. But because we don't have an indication of frequency, then it's going to be not given for question 7. Okay, moving on to question 8. None of the Earth's largest eruptions occurred in the Yellowstone area. Okay, so we've got a nice focus. None of the Earth's largest eruptions occurred in the Yellowstone area. So we're looking for largest eruptions, and we're looking for Yellowstone. 18 eruptions, some of the world's. I remember from my question C, we're talking about Yellowstone, and I remember this is talking about frequency of eruptions, and we have the sentence, some of the world's largest eruptions are included within the Yellowstone eruptions. Some of those are like almost all the keywords. So we've got here, again, we're looking at question 8. So you've got our keyword, our frequency word, non. Okay, so often they'll give you an absolute word. Non, always, sometimes, often. So this is saying none of the Earth's largest eruptions occurred in the Yellowstone area. Okay, so it's saying absolutely none of them. No largest eruptions were in the Yellowstone area. And then when we look at section C, we've got our keyword some of the world's largest eruptions are included within the Yellowstone eruptions. Okay, so we've got our thing, some of the world's largest eruptions, none of the Earth's largest eruptions. Okay, so is this going to be true or is this going to be false? Well, it's directly opposite, right? Some and none. So that's how we know that this one is going to be false. Okay, because they've given us information in the paragraph which is directly opposite, contradicts what they said in the question. Okay, some and none are not the same meaning. All right, so let's go down to question 9. The Lava Creek eruption sent traces over a very wide area. So our keyword here is Lava Creek. So you've got to work on your scanning skills. Okay, so we're scanning through, we're looking for Lava Creek, Lava Creek, Lava Creek, and then I can see it here, Lava Creek Tuff. So let's see, the sentence goes, the most recent eruption created the Lava Creek Tuff and formed the present caldera with the size of blah, blah, blah. The actual caldera is, but the population stays like the Lava Creek Tuff eruption covered such an area that the ash can still be found in places far as Iowa, Louisiana, and California. Okay, so we've got 2 key sentences here. We've got our section that talks specifically about Lava Creek Tuff. So question 9 is telling us the Lava Creek eruption sent traces over a very wide region. Okay, so this is going to be our sort of like our description-y part of the sentence. We're looking for, did it cover a large area? Okay, so we've got the caldera, Wyoming, states of Iowa. The Lava Creek Tuff eruption covered such an area that the ash can still be found in places as far away as Iowa, Louisiana, and California. Okay, now, this is a little bit of general knowledge. I know that Louisiana is very far away from Wyoming in American geography, and they say clearly in the text, as far away as. Okay, so it's indicating that these places are very far away from where Lava Creek Tuff is. So we do know that it was a very wide region, including, and they've given us specifics, so that's how we know that this is going to be true. Okay, because they said as far away as, very wide region, has the same meaning. All right, so in question 10, geologists spend a large amount of their time trying to predict the next Yellowstone eruption. Okay, so this is our prediction question. Okay, so we need to find our prediction. So this is our probability paragraph that we remember. So we're looking for geologists as well. Okay, so we've got our keyword geologists and prediction. So if we're scanning through, we've got geological survey, rising score, midsummer, and then I'm looking for, we've also got the word geological survey down here. However, U.S. Geological Survey scientists with the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory see no evidence that another such cataclysmic eruption will occur at Yellowstone in the foreseeable future. The periods between these events are neither regular nor predictable. Okay, so basically the geologists are saying that they don't see evidence that there's going to be one soon, but they can't really tell because it's so unpredictable. They can't tell. So what have we got in question 10? Geologists spend a large amount of their time trying to predict the next Yellowstone eruption. Okay, so this is one of our sort of tricky ones because it doesn't actually, in the passage, tell us anything about the amount of time they spend trying to predict it. They say it's very difficult. They say that they don't see any evidence, but what they've not specifically told us is how much time they spend trying to predict the next eruption. So because this is crucially missing, the time they spend. We have their prediction, but we don't know. They could have come up with this prediction in 2 days quickly. It could have taken them years. We just don't know. Okay, so that's how we know it's not given. All right. Okay, so the next question we're going to look at is filling in the answers. So this is where you have to look at the table and you have to fill in the missing information. So they kind of give you your headings over here, and then you've got sort of like 2 sections of notes that link up to it. So we're first thing with measurements taken while monitoring Yellowstone. So we know that we've got to look for something, how often and how many small something happens. Okay, for question 11. So we know that in section D, they've been talking about measurements and Yellowstone. Let's go back up to section D. So we've got here, reservoir, changes in magma, more than 3 times. Measurements began in 1923. So we know that it's talking about what they're measuring, the number, and frequency of minor earthquakes is also monitored. Minor is also a synonym for small, so that we know that the answer is going to be small. I mean, earthquakes. Okay. So we know question 11 is going to be earthquakes. We go down to question 12. Interpretation of present evidence. In the something, experts believe that there is little to no chance of a major volcanic event. So we know that we already just read this when we were looking at our previous answer about predicting the geologists predicting their answers. So we know it should be in the foreseeable future. Okay, so again, this is in section D. That we read this when we were looking at the prediction one, and then for 13, because of their irregularity, it is hard to determine the. So we know that in section D, the US Geological Survey scientists see no evidence that another cataclysmic eruption will occur at Yellowstone in the foreseeable future. So that's where we got that from. And the periods between these events are neither regular nor predictable. So the answer is periods. Okay, it's hard to determine the periods between eruptions at Yellowstone. So our final answer, question 14, is scientists predict Yellowstone would be, and then something more powerful, okay? So because we remember that in section E, it talked about powerful, more powerful than St. Helens. We know that in section E, they give us a comparison, which is, by way of comparison, the 1918 Mount St. Helens eruption caused $1 billion in damage. That's the prediction. By way of comparison, St. Helens eruption caused an estimated $1 billion damages, and the Yellowstone is expected to erupt within 10,000 times the force of Mount St. Helens. Okay, so the answer needs to be 10,000 times more than St. Helens. Okay, so actually this wasn't so bad as reading sections go. I think the most tricky section is this final section where you're choosing words to fill in. I think the true, false, not given wasn't too bad, and I think this list of headings was relatively straightforward. As always, I always recommend just take 2 or 3 minutes, read the first sentence of each paragraph, take some notes about the topic of the paragraphs, and it really just helps make everything else a lot easier.